Welcome everyone, my name is Tim Hespy. I am the Channel Account Manager at Nuvotera, and I will be serving as your moderator today. As many of you already know, protecting your data from the outside world can be difficult without the proper precautions in place. Today we'll be discussing unprotected data, vulnerable endpoints, and how they lead to data breaches. I'm going to go ahead and pass the controls over to Eric Pinto, our Products Manager, and Billy Austin, the creator of the iScan technology, so they can tell us more.
All right, excellent. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. We've got some, just to set the stage a little bit, I've got about 7 or 8 slides here just to leverage as talking points. And really excited today to also be able to provide some eye-opening analytics and illustrations on either, depending on your role in the position, on how we can help customers and help our surrounding employees being able to visualize, what's at stake, why these data breaches are taking place. And so, to make a long story short, created a nice little slide deck called Winning the War on Data Breaches and how we can all contribute who's participating on this call today. So with that said, matter of fact, 5 minutes before I connected this, I just got a new headline from the local news here, and it's, I guess, somebody, one of the leading research firms just announced 43% of all organizations had experienced a breach in 2013, which ironically very much so complements the presentation and talk we're doing today. So why are these data breaches continuing to grow, and what is it that we can do about it? I'm not going to get into the details in terms of all the headlines and news and examples. I think we see enough of that. So what I am going to do is get straight to the point that says what I'm a big believer in is if we know what we don't know and leverage what we call the discovery of unprotected data in the technology world, we call that data discovery. And essentially what that does is that's going to, think of that like your Kodak camera. When you hop onto the network, it takes a static snapshot in time that essentially just illustrates all of that unprotected data at risk, so that way we can be able to know and start taking action before an actual incident occurs. So the next obvious question is, where do we start? Where is a good starting point? So I put together 4 common areas on how we're helping organizations mitigate and actually avoid becoming that next likely data breach victim, if you will, and what to discover and why these things are important. So first of all, when we talk about cardholder data, for those of you on the call that may not be familiar with that, that's also known as credit card data, payment data. Some of us that live in the PCI DSS world may actually have heard it called PAN. And PAN is actually the primary account number, which is the 13 to 19 digit number that sits on the front of your card. In the United States, most of us have anywhere from 15 to 16 digits. And if you're reviewing the headlines and the RSS feeds, much like I am, credit card data definitely tends to make the top of all the headlines, specifically with the Targets, the Neiman Marcus, the Home Depot, so on and so forth. Secondly is personal identifiable information. Some of us may know that from an acronym known as PII, and it's pronounced PI, but nevertheless, it's so when you think about personal identifiable information, if you're an energy or a utility company and you're trying to get electricity, if you're a home resident or a consumer and you're trying to turn on your energy service, what is it that you have to provide? In most cases, you have to provide a driver's license, a credit card number on file, your social security, your address, your date of birth. And us from a consumer, away from the day job for a second, we're having to give our information with that trust and confidence that these corporations are actually protecting and storing our data the way that they should. Third thing that gets often overlooked is what I call trade secrets. And probably one of the best, there's probably been 3 recent breaches that I'm pretty familiar with on trade secrets. One of them happened to be a professional baseball team down here in, I'm actually based out of Dallas, Texas. It was the Houston Astros. They were talking about there was a Word document that got compromised where they were discussing actual player trade movements. And what happened is when that document got compromised and posted all over, it basically jeopardized all their confidential trade discussions. So that's one example. Another one was Boeing that happened to be an architectural blueprint, if you will. And then intellectual property. And you might be saying, well, gosh, I'm a telemarketing company, or maybe I'm a franchise owner of taco stands. Regardless, if you really look hard, every business is all based on the foundation of trade secrets and intellectual property. And these can be simple things like customer lists, so on and so forth. But as a good starting point for a good mass majority of the world, we're all storing cardholder data or PI, or the good majority of us. And it's really, always get back to say, we're storing it where you least expect it. So you'll probably hear me say that again. But nevertheless, so data discovery, finding out where that data actually resides. And we're going to be able to provide some nice visualizations on that today. Number two, now that we know where that sensitive data is, that's the ultimate target for what I call these data mongers or cyber attackers, whatever you want to call them. How do they actually get access to that data? And at the end of the day, it's because of a system that didn't have a password, or they were vulnerable to Java, Adobe, perhaps at the operating system level. My point is that there's a vulnerable endpoint that the attacker leveraged to be able to gain access to that specific data. And one thing to keep in mind is, even though that one machine did not have data, that one device could be used as what's called a pivot point. And once you gain access to that pivot point, then you can be able to connect and leverage to exploit trusted relationships from that one compromised machine. So what is it when we're talking about when we're detecting vulnerabilities? Notice that step number one, I was using the word discover, so that's discover the data. Number two, how we can start avoiding these data breaches is detect the security threats and the vulnerability posture on those same devices where that data was discovered. And that's going to be things like an operating system, application, as I've already alluded to. And one thing that's very commonly overlooked is what I call the configuration. And if you guys are researching data breaches like I am on a very frequent basis, you're probably going to run into things like, gosh, you saw somebody that broke the window and they compromised a laptop and it had no encryption, no on-screen password, those types of things. I mean, there's hundreds of analogies, but those are two common ones. And then the fourth one is also a list of running, really, it's unnecessary services. So, you know, obviously you don't want to be running things like RAS or Telnet on some type of laptop that's connected internally to where the crown jewels are. So that's a simple analogy. So third is, now that we understand the detection and discovery of both threats and the data, if you go and you research the latest 10 or 20 breaches, one thing that you're going to find, there's always two commonalities. It cannot be a breach if there's no data that's involved. If it was simply just an attack, it would be called a security incident. But when the data is involved, then that's when it gets classified as a data breach. Now, once again, the confidential data is one of those attack vectors. The other attack vector is it's either going to equate to one of the bottom three down here, and that would be your vulnerability status. So the vulnerability status and the confidential data, two of those things equate to what I call a data breach. And the way that we can start avoiding that and putting a dent in what I call data theft or data crime is discovering that data before, not after. And the first thing that typically happens after these breaches is now everybody wants to go and invest and saying, gosh, where was all this data at? What did they steal? Where does it reside? And what I'm here saying today is we should be proactively assessing those endpoints before something happens. Next is what I would like to do is go dive directly into the technology and show you how simple it is to start avoiding these data breaches. By the way, I'll send you, have Eric and gang drop this link out. This is a really good article that I was just talking about. 43% of the companies had a data breach last year. It just crossed my desk, so pass that out as a nice reference. So what you're looking at right here is what we call the iScan Cloud Console. And I'm really going to focus on two specific points right now. One is I'm going to start up here with the map, and basically what you're looking at, these little dots, this is where we've actually discovered unprotected data and geolocated that device. So for an example, if I'm a small business and I've got 10 employees, I know that probably a good rough estimate of where that data should be and where those devices, and it may raise a red flag if I have some laptop over here with my corporate trade secrets over here in the UK, or maybe down here in Mexico or Cuba, or maybe not. But nevertheless, that's really with that intention. We have a lot of development and added features and functionality going into this analytics on the mapping. Secondly, what I'd like to be able to illustrate, which really paints a nice clear picture, is for those that are interested in payment data, we have what's called credit card data at risk. And what that simply means is if I've got 1,000 employees and I've assessed all 1,000 of those devices, it's going to come back and show me a summary of all the 7 card brands, in this case, that were discovered. Your first y-axis is going to give you the number of cards that were discovered. And secondly is we're going to start stepping it up so we can be able to have an engaging conversation at the C-suite level. And what I mean by the C-suite level, that's going to be CFOs, CISOs, CIOs. As a matter of fact, I've personally been engaging with that level of position primarily to understand how they're going to present this data. And one of my recent experiences is that's exactly what I need for our CISO or CFO to be able to present to the boardroom, to be able to understand what your current security posture and your liability exposure is as of today if an actual incident would occur. Secondly is, I'll just run over this real quick for those that aren't necessarily involved interested in payment data. You also have those other trade secrets, IP, PI that we were talking about, and that's where you would have things like driver's license, social security, so on and so forth. Before we move any further, before we get dive deeper into additional analytics, I did want to say that the average cost of a North American record is roughly $201. That aligns with our research and also reputable research firms like the Ponemon Institute, and that's how that liability factor or that liability exposure is getting calculated. So once we start diving into these reports, which we'll go ahead and do right now, is that'll help clear that up. The first thing I want to do is paint the visualization on unencrypted credit card data at rest, since that's what tends to get all the media. And what I'm going to do right now is open up this analytics and just kind of explain this real quick, and then we'll dive into it. What you're looking at here, once again, is the 7 different types of card brands that were discovered on this specific network. Okay, and keep in mind, a lot of audits that take place, they tend to take place in what I call an audit zone that might be 4 or 5 PCs. Based on my research and my experience, this type of data exists on roughly 92% of all your computers. It'll be stored in browsers, documents, Dropboxes, so on and so forth. And as you can see, that when you hover over all of these host names, one thing that we're going to be able to do is illustrate that one machine. Think about all those records that are sitting there putting your business at risk. And when we hover up to the little bubble here, we decided to go ahead and put it in dollars because it gets back to a starting point. It's like, great, you found all this data, where do I start? And from a business perspective and a risk management point of view, it's my number one goal is to start mitigating and chopping away at the risk to minimize my liability exposure. Thus the reason being able to put in dollars to these technical reports that also make it meaningful for executives is very interesting. So today we're looking at one specific network, and by the way, you can be able to dynamically change these. The default sorting is going to be by liability. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I'm either A, a managed service provider, or B, that I'm actually a corporation with lots of customers. Lots of remote locations. So what I'm going to do is actually group by organization, which if I'm helping my customers or in charge of lots of remote offices, I can now see that liability exposure by branch office or customer. And that allows me to put emphasis or prioritize my starting point on where I'm going to focus first. Going back to the sort by the host again, some interesting things that you can do is, you know what, I'm very interested to see how many people throughout my corporation are storing payment data in Dropbox or perhaps Google Drive. And what that typically means is if they've got Google Drive or Dropbox with your trade secrets, that now is on your Android device or on your tablet. And historical research shows that 1 out of 20 of those types of mobile devices are either lost or stolen, which now has this type of data based on Google Drive in this analogy. Another reason for having that file type is I'm sure most of the people, or a good majority of us on this call, have researched the data breaches regarding the black POS, some of the malware. And when you start analyzing what that malware is doing, it's scraping the system looking for card data. And what it does is it hides it in a hidden file. But the unique thing is it's actually hidden in a plain text file. So we could actually type in a full file format or a file path, if you will, and we could look for a specific string like, you know, PDF documents or maybe cached in an HTML browser, those types of things, really to get some unique things. And one of the things that I want to illustrate, when you type something here, it also auto-populates your entire table. So let's go ahead and put that back to Dropbox real quick. And you'll notice that down at the bottom, I've got $619,000 worth of liability just from people storing data in Dropbox, okay? So that's, I did want to be able to show you one thing real quick. If you do share these reports with your CISO, they probably are too busy to log into a console. So if you share the report, one thing that you're going to find is you can, since there's such a mountain full of data here, we thought it'd be very nice to just share an HTML report where your executives could be able to view this data, run the queries or manipulate it however they will. So give them a little power, but remove all the administration functions. So I thought I'd show that real quick. By the way, there is a switch percentage. It's just a preference view. Who likes to view 100% stack charts, those types of things. The next thing that I would like to show is complementing the second slide that we illustrated, and that's combining both your data and the actual security threat. And that's what we call the data breach risk report. So on this data breach risk report, it actually tells a very interesting story. And let me explain all the pretty little colors here. Over here, you've got 4 different data types for this demonstration. As we can all attest to, these are where the university medical centers, the hospitals, and the energy companies are having breaches, all surrounding these 4 types of data points. Secondly, what we're telling here are these severities. Now, the severity is based on what's called the CVSS scoring system, which is a ranking from 0 to 10 based on the criticality of that security threat. High being anywhere from 7 to 10, medium, low, so on and so forth. Now these numbers here are simply the number of records, number of threats on this side, and the number of unprotected data that was discovered, okay? If I work for you and you said, Billy, I need some help clearing up improving my security posture and mitigating the likelihood of a data breach, I'm probably going to dynamically update and start focusing on the critical threat. 2 is I may actually eliminate the date of birth and really focus on, data types that are of most value. Definitely the Social Security and credit card fit into that range for this demonstration purposes. And so with that said, this is a very interesting view on how you can be able to sort and filter this data. And at the end of the day, when you go out and you talk to these customers or you look at your business, most people do not have the insights or the visualization of what we're sitting here illustrating on one simple report that pretty much tells the whole story of why these data breaches are taking place. Secondly, so we are looking at group machines or perhaps full enterprise, if you will. If you click into these, we can also get to what's called an individual report. And when I click on that report, one thing that's going to allow you to do is actually go drill down into a specific host. And when you look at the host, it's going to say, you know what, how long did it take, how many bytes. By default, it's going to assess your local drive. But if you do have connected drives or network shared drives, it would illustrate that as well. Really quickly, it's going to give you a summary of all the data types in those records. And most importantly, it's going to tell you why that user is actually putting your business at risk by where that data was stored. Now, the unique thing about this is if you decide after this call that you're going to go out and run a sample assessment on 10 or 25 of your machines, it's very likely, from what we've seen, to find an employee emailing, either sending or receiving confidential data. So what we do there is we're going to give you a timestamp of that, basically just a stamp of the header, and then we're also going to mask the data because we do not want to be liable for actually retaining your data. So we're just giving you sufficient information to give you that header and that footer so you can be able to appropriately take action. If you have a conversation with myself or other colleagues, we're going to tell you either A, you need to encrypt this type of data if it has a reason for residing there, or B, securely remove it or securely delete it. The other thing that's going to be part of this is if, in fact, when you find lots and lots of data on your employees' desktops or your servers, it could create some type of security awareness training or other remediation actions that are involving the human element, if you will. Okay? Let's explore another interesting view, and that's we talked about PI, and we also illustrated that in the data breach risk report, but I want to specifically focus on PI that's really heavily involved with the healthcare industry, and to be honest with you, it's lots and lots of industries. When I originally started researching PI, healthcare is the easy one that we pick on. It's not a big, colorful chart. The story is really in the grid that allows you to dynamically update this. So if I wanted a clear picture that says, show me all my data on my Android devices. So this is really unique because now I can specifically nail down 4 Android devices and their total risk at $831,000 for people that's storing sensitive data. Now, check this out. What if we said, how's that data getting on the Android? Either A, they're BYOD, or they're privileged employees, or perhaps maybe they're using something like Dropbox that gets it on those same 3 Android devices. And now you start seeing the impact of adopting cloud sharing technologies or giving users that ability. But at the bottom line, without these types of analytics, you're never going to know what's really happening behind the scenes. And hopefully some of the things that we're showing here today start opening up the eyes or basically provide some eye-opening intelligence and analytics on what if they could have had this visualization before those breaches took place. The last report that I want to illustrate on is lots of reports that you can create, is the vulnerability threat. So it's specifically just showing those high, mediums, and lows that we were talking about. There we go. So it's so basically one of the unique things about this, it's not meant to be some pretty chart. The red, as you can see, you've got the severity levels over here. The unique thing about this from a security researcher or an InfoSec manager, or even if I work for a service provider that's helping other customers, think about this use case. On the references, think about that 0-day or that specific 2014 threat that came out, and maybe it was Java. I can pinpoint every computer that's got that Java 2014. Or maybe it was an older threat from 2013. And you see the powerful analytics that dynamically update and basically give you that power and that visualization to know what we did not know. Same thing is, it could be, you could be looking for a malware that just affected Skype or whatever that happened to be. Unfortunately, I don't have that demonstration, but nevertheless, just some very interesting analytics and ways to visualize data that can help start making a dent in these data breaches. So what I've been talking about really more is the analytics, talked a little bit about the data, the dashboard. And I think what I would like to do right now is, for me personally, not understanding the entire audience that's on the call, is how is it most commonly deployed and how can I know this today? And I deal with a variety of a lot of service providers, mid-market and enterprise companies. And the most common popular way to start going and performing these assessments is to click on what's called scan other computers. So the first step that I tell when I'm consulting with someone, let's go know what we don't know by discovering what's unprotected. And for an example, if we click on what's called data discovery, in this case it's that PI we talked about. Alternative, we could do PAN. If you recall, that's the credit card data. For this case, I'm going to select data discovery, and I want to illustrate all the different possibilities of how you can discover that data now. So if you're a service provider, you could pretty much be using these remote monitoring and management tools, Kaseya, LabTech, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, most of our customers are using what's called the command line executable. And the beauty about this is there's no agent installs. You simply download this executable, put it on a file or network share, and then you can be able to use any systems management tool like Active Directory, GPO. Matter of fact, I ran into a couple use cases last week where people were using Microsoft SCCM. And what you're going to do is basically initiate that executable that's going to go out and run on all those systems. And what happens is when that runs, all of that data comes back to your console so you can be able to perform those analytics and reporting. So that way you can be able to help either your security operations team, your administrators, or perhaps senior management and board of directors. You're probably wondering, what's that scan this computer? That is what's called scanning through the browser. There's a lot of use cases for scanning through the browser, but in the real world, it's mostly through the command line executable. Scanning through the computer, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that for you. It could be used for remote employees that are connecting via a web portal that want to do automatic scanning upon connectivity, or in fact, it could also be used for Security Awareness Week. Lots of different use cases here. The beauty about this stuff is I'm not sending any detrimental packets. There's no impact to the machine. I don't need admin rights. And these scans are really super, super fast. And on the security scan, as you can see from the cloud to my Mac here, it finished a nice little security scan in a matter of seconds. One thing that I did not illustrate was the actual individual host report on a security machine. And what we decided to do is, instead of listing 500 problems, is what if we just gave you the good news report that says, I don't want to show you the 500 problems. I want to tell you the 3 or 4 things that you need to fix. And so essentially what I'm saying here is if I go update my Java, that's going to eliminate 14% of my risk on how that data thief could be able to compromise my system and get access. Now, if there happens to be any security researchers on the phone or technical people, we also provide you those technical details. And then at the bottom, we'll give you a list of all those running reports as well. So with that said, let's see, let's go back over here to the console real quick. And I'm sure Eric will summarize this with some questions. But what I did want to do is just finish up a couple more slides. So for your customers or for those organizations that are specifically focused on payment data, people ask, why do you guys break it out by card brand? And the reason, one of the main driving reasons is because we've actually found out from talking and interviewing our customers that not every corporation accepts every card brand. So if in fact you had $1 million of liability on American Express, I present the question, why are we held accountable for that liability if in fact that specific card brand resides on our network? Okay. Secondly is, since I've been talking about payment data, it's much, much more. As you can see, we illustrated all of those endpoints. We're storing, passports, date of birth, so on and so forth. But PII is definitely what I would say is that phase 2, depending on your business type or your organization. But please do not forget to be focusing on assessing your intellectual property and trade secrets, because that is the crown jewels of your business and the premise of how your business is going to succeed and grow for tomorrow. With that said, I think we painted a clear picture. We can also send that link of that new article that just came out today, hot off the news press. But we've been seeing this. I've been in this business for about 17 or 18 years, and I have never seen a seriousness about all these data breaches that are being reported. It reminds me a little bit about the .com days, and I think I do not see a shortage in the reporting of these new data breaches for lots of reasons. One, more and more people are storing data. Two is there's vulnerabilities. Three is there's now 47 state laws that are now going to mandate the reporting of any incident, and that varies from state to state. And then actually going on today is the Armed Forces Committee is actually meeting on a federal law that's now going to mandate the discovery and reporting of specifically PII data that affects an American citizen or American resident. Not to mention all the regulatory bodies that are already driving this. So it's getting ready to be a very, very hot item. In fact, it already is a hot item. We're just kind of getting on the forefront of this. My name is Billy Austin. I'm the president of iScan Online. That's my presentation and the technical stuff. Eric?
Billy, these reports look great. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about them. I've seen the system obviously before. Are they new? Can you tell us a little bit about the report and the report widgets?
Yes, the reports are they're brand new. To be honest with you, we have not even announced them yet. We've been been working with our enterprise customers. I had the opportunity to meet with a couple CISOs at some large universities, and they said, "Hold on a second, I've got to grab my CIO." And the beauty is, you know me, Eric, I've always had these technical conversations with security guys, and so now I'm finding myself in meetings with the C-suite, primarily, I think, a couple reasons. One is we're giving a really simple visualization on what the risk posture is if something happens. And what we want to do is be able to paint that picture and then be able to start creating remediation corrective action planning on how we can start bringing this bar down. Matter of fact, in the development right now is anticipating that you guys are getting ready to start launching this stuff crazy. we're working on the next report, which is going to be your trending analysis that's going to start illustrating, okay, well, my current business has $2 billion of liability. Next month, I want to be able to measure and show progress that it's now at 1.8 billion or million, whatever that number is. So those, I'm anticipating maybe another week and a half or 2 weeks on what I call differential reporting or trend analysis to illustrate that we're protecting our customers from one point in time to the next. Okay, you know, there's another thing that I thought I would show real quick, and what you're getting ready to look at right now is what we call our organizational grid. And let me explain that. There's two different views here. One is called the flat view and the other is the tree view. So if I'm Starbucks, or let's see, if I'm a barbecue franchise, the domain would be like my corporate location over here. And I may want to visit the security posture of a specific location in Oklahoma City. So basically what I'm trying to illustrate here is we have what's called a multi-tenant console and platform. That's one way to view it. The other way is if you have a tree view, this could be your company. It could be your direct offices or direct customers. And then you can also have what's called fully nesting. So corporation, maybe it's my franchise. That franchise could then have its remote locations. And then you could even set up your taco stands or burger stands underneath that. So yeah, really, really, really cool stuff. You also have access to full grids on the scans. So when you're looking at the full scans, you can say, you know, show me my data discovery on a Windows-based system, and then that'll quickly navigate. And as you can see that I can come down here and take a look at Clint Eastwood, open it up, and see whatever that posture is. As a matter of fact, here's a nice little individual report that says, here's your socials, your date of births, and then show me where you found all that stuff.
That's good, and you know, I think that there'll be a lot of a reaction, Billy, over your searching out based on some of the file sync and cloud technology. Earlier, when you were showing the reports, you were able to specify or pull the report based on some Dropbox information. I think that's going to resonate with our callers. Let's go ahead and wrap up the call for this month.
On behalf of the entire Nuvotera team, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you have any questions, if you'd like to follow up, please direct your communication to the account manager. If you're unsure who your account manager is, please send an email to sales@nuvotera.com, and we will get in contact with you. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.